Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
This episode is proudly sponsored by MetaGeek. For more than a decade, network professionals have used MetaGeek Wi-Fi tools to deploy, maintain, and troubleshoot wireless networks. Visit metageek.com/CTS and use the code CTS10 at checkout for 10% off your purchase of MetaGeek brand hardware and software. Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. I am your host, Roel Dionisio. Unfortunately, Francois will not be joining us today. He's actually traveling and working at the same time, so very fortunate of him. He is somewhere in Europe, I believe, and he's doing a training, a Cisco training, or he is taking a training, one of the two. But the hour gap, the hours of the gap between us is just too far. I think it's 12 hours, and we just aren't able to sync up to do this episode together. So I'm going to do this one solo, and hopefully he'll be back next week to join us. And in this episode, I wanted to go over from Mobility Field Day 2, Nyansa Voyance and their analytics system. And I wanted to see what has updated since the last time we heard from them, because MFD2, Mobility Field Day 2, was back on July 26th of 2017. And from what I see, there's been a lot of changes within Nyansa and the analytics platform that they have called Voyance, and wanted to dive in and see how this helps people manage their Wi-Fi networks and also on their wired networks as well. Because we can, from what we saw on the demo at Mobility Field Day 2, it looked very interesting to see how we can come to certain conclusions about our Wi-Fi network, how we can come to some root causes of issues that are happening on Wi-Fi, and among other things. So Nyansa, they were founded on September 2013. They are in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto. And what Nyansa does is they take advantage of analytics, which is an everyday part of our lives. Analytics is everywhere. And it also changes the way we work. And that way analytics is able to drive certain business decisions and create certain actions, especially in this case with technical teams, because the way Nyansa, their product Voyance, works is it's going to gather a lot of data, take that analytics and be able to tell you certain information, and hopefully bring that to your attention before all the end users do. And as we know, end users are a form of notification, but we usually don't want it to get to that point. So the guys over at Nyansa, I asked them, hey, what's new? What can I talk about with Nyansa? And they were very cool and gave me access to their demo environment so I can take a look at what's in the platform. I know they mentioned some of these features to us at MFD2, so I wanted to take a deeper look at it because they do have quite a bit of data already populated within their demo. And the first thing when you log into Nyansa is, first, why don't we talk about how Nyansa works, because I'm sure some of you guys don't know. Well, Nyansa is, they do all their analytics in the cloud. But in order to get all the data that they need to do all their analytics, all the trends that they collect, and all the other information they need to create reports for you or alerts, they have what's called a crawler that gets deployed in your environment. And depending on what kind of wireless system you have, and their two biggest systems are going to be with Cisco controllers, as well as Aruba controllers. And I'm sure they support other platforms, or maybe they are supporting other platforms. That part I'm not too sure of yet. But that crawler will take in data from your controllers via SNMP or an API that is made available to Nyansa so they can incorporate that into their platform. And that data gets analyzed up in the cloud. Now, it doesn't take any of any data, the payload from any traffic that's being transmitted back and forth between clients and out to the internet. It's just going to take a look at certain characteristics, such as any wireless Wi-Fi metrics that it should be looking at, like associations and maybe DNS, and also, I mean, there's a lot of other things that it's collecting. Radius also grabs SNR, RSSI, a lot of things, and also settings from your access points, such as what channel it's on, transmit power, which controller they're connected to, and also aside from grabbing data from the controller, it's going to take traffic either through a span or a tap and analyze, I think, some of the headers in the packets that are being sent from the span port, or again the tap, and it correlates that data as well, so it's able to tell you whether Wi-Fi is the problem, or maybe it's something that's not Wi-Fi. Maybe the problem appears to be Wi-Fi, but it could be, I don't know, DHCP, for example, or maybe DNS, or maybe the application itself that the user is using, that could be a problem. Because among Wi-Fi, some of the settings that they will, not settings, but some of the traffic they will analyze is also application. So they can track things like Jabber calls, looking at Skype, Zoom. So they take a lot of this data and determine whether or not, essentially, is the question is Wi-Fi the problem, or is it the application? And they try to give you some root cause analysis to help you determine what, or point you in the right direction to help you resolve the issue much faster. So you're not you're not looking for a needle in a haystack, for example, whenever a user says, hey, I had a problem in the conference room with Wi-Fi, it just wasn't working. I just want to let you know. That's a common comment somebody will leave. So with the data that's captured, you can go back in time and kind of look at that and see what exactly happened. And as long as you have the information, such as the user's device name or MAC address, you can do a search, depending on what you need. And so essentially there's this device called a crawler, grabs all that data for you, and then all the analytics is crushed and analyzed in the cloud, in their cloud platform. So upon logging in to Nyansa, one of the newest things from Nyansa is this campus view. And if you have multiple sites, you can define these sites, and it's overlaid onto a map. And so when you have multiple sites, it'll list it for you. You can hide that list, but it'll also tell you whether or not there are these incidents in any of these sites. And incidents could be things that you've that are defined as issues such as DNS outages, or maybe there's a large set of clients affected by DHCP, or maybe they couldn't, or they had a poor Wi-Fi calling as an example. And so there's these different indicators which they will prioritize as P1, P2, P3 incidents, and P4 being the lowest. And there are some default values there, but they could be changed depending on your environment. But overall, that's the first window that I see logging in, is this campus view, which is overlaid on a map. It's pretty responsive. And in this account, I can see 3 sites. And as I zoom in to a specific area, the sites start to show themselves. And I either have a green icon for that site, which means there are no incidents to report, or it is red. And you can drill and click on the site and see why it's red, what kind of incidents pop up. So that's kind of neat, as it ties into a map. And this could be very useful for things like a knock, as an example. So if people are monitoring Wi-Fi, they can easily identify, all right, we got an issue here at this site in San Jose. Let's drill into it and figure out what's going on. And you can let users know that, hey, yeah, we're on top of it. We see this incident. We're looking into it, and we'll get back to you really, really quickly. So that's the newest thing. The other thing that I noticed right away too is in the dashboard section. The map is one of those dashboards. It's called Global, but an additional dashboard is called Service Desk. And the Service Desk is really where your service desk will sit when they're troubleshooting any client connectivity problems. And this could be for your help desk, as an example. And with the role of a service desk, this is the only view that this person will see, because as an admin or someone with a higher role, they have the ability to see much more details as far as what kind of applications are having issues, and really diving deep to see a lot of different information. But sometimes service desk does not need all that information. What they will typically need to know is, all right, who are my most problematic clients at the moment? How many hours are they affected? And the way that Nyansa actually defines issues are the number of hours that a device is affected with either poor Wi-Fi performance or something else. And you can actually quantify that pretty well down to the productivity hours that are wasted due to some sort of issue that's happening with this client device. And so as a service desk person, you can actually see the most problematic clients so they can be proactive and drill into a specific client. So if they click on that, it could be labeled with either poor Wi-Fi performance, or maybe there's some radius issue that's happening with another client, or there's some sort of anomaly where a lot of port scans are going on. So as an example, I can drill into one with radius connectivity as a potential issue. When you go into this specific device, it provides a lot of different information on the screen. It's kind of a nice single pane of glass with information that they display to you. So it does tell you if it's wireless, what kind of username, what the username is that they're using, which access point that they were last seen on, and also what channel they were connecting to that access point, what VLAN it's connected to, whether or not the device is DFS capable. Really cool information and useful, because it'll also tell you which radius server it's connecting to. And so in this issue, I see that there was some sort of radius issue. It clearly states with a red exclamation point radius, and it already just tells me up front that there was an EAP authentication failed, credentials were rejected. And so clearly if users are having problems and you were remote, the service desk can handle this. If they were able to grab the user's MAC address or even the username, they can do a search. And the information just says, hey, your credentials weren't correct, and therefore it was rejected. And so that's one way to get down to the root cause right away, especially if you have the information you need to look up the device. Now, from here, which is cool, as you're looking at the client information, and it tells you how often this incident occurred, over around what time, the day, what other attributes such as how many other people are affected by the same problem on this radius server, because it could be a configuration issue. I don't know, maybe the radius server was pointed to the wrong database where all the user accounts are stored. So that's a possibility. If a huge increase of rejected credentials occurred, that would actually trigger maybe an incident, a priority incident that could be taken, that could be looked at much quickly. But in this case, I'm able to see things like again, when it occurred, and from there's charts, and I think the charts are great information to be displayed in this fashion, because a lot of times I'm used to just seeing the raw data, but here they will take that data and put it on a graph for you so it's easily digestible. And there's different kinds of charts, and one of them being Wi-Fi. You can see, what their SNR was, connecting to the access point. What kind of AP channel utilization did that access point have? What percentage of the packets are retries, which is very handy to know. And then what's neat from here is if there is a problem, as you're hovering your mouse over the graph to see what time that occurred and some other details, you can actually click on that graph, which will then trigger on the right side an event timeline. And the event timeline, which I haven't mentioned, kind of outlines everything that's happened with this client, down to Wi-Fi associations, disassociations, what IP address did it get, when it is after it authenticated, what channel did it join an access point on, and what that access point name was, and also the incident that occurred, in this case the radius issue. So let's say there is an issue here, and maybe you somehow needed to create a ticket, or the user needed to create a ticket from this point. So the service desk can help create a ticket for some reason if it was kind of beyond their hand, out of their reach. There is an integration within Nyansa where you can integrate ServiceNow. So if you're using ServiceNow, there is a special integration there that they have. And what's cool is you from here, this viewpoint, you can just open a ticket directly, give it a impact, the urgency, a description, and some notes. So that's a cool integration with ServiceNow that can be generated there. So just going back here, that was a service desk, and I think that's one way to give some capability to your team as far as when they're troubleshooting wireless, because some of the issues that I've seen with service desk or help desk is these guys don't have the tools they need to really troubleshoot some of the wireless problems that are happening out there in your environment. And typically what I see is these tickets will be received by the service desk. They'll probably ask a few questions such as what your issue is, what's your name, what device were you using, etc. Sometimes you don't even get that much information, but then they just escalate the ticket up because they can't really troubleshoot beyond, all right, you had this issue. Where did you have this issue? Okay. I'll notify the network team because it's a network issue, right? And so, what I think Nyansa will help with workflow is it provides this another tool for your service desk to kind of look into what an issue might be. Now, granted, some of this data might not be super familiar with the service desk, and I believe there's going to be a lot of training involved as far as teaching your service desk members what to look for when they're troubleshooting Wi-Fi issues, because maybe they assume incorrectly what the issue might be. And so I think there's going to be some Wi-Fi training involved, some very basic Wi-Fi training that the service desk needs to know when they're troubleshooting an issue with a client, such as what access point they're connecting to, getting more details basically, and figuring out, all right, they're connected on this channel, either it's 2.4 or 5. Maybe the client can't connect to the 5 gigahertz channel because it doesn't support DFS. Like that's something that might be that comes up in the discussion. So, like I said, I think Service Desk is a great addition to Nyansa as provide more capabilities to teams, but the teams still need to be trained at least with fundamental Wi-Fi. They could start with the lower level CWNP training material just to get their feet wet and understanding how Wi-Fi works, so they can better serve the team and also the clients. So that's Service Desk. What else do we got here? we have another dashboard, which is the summary dashboard, which is the same dashboard that we've seen when Nyansa presented at MFD2. It has changed just, I guess, visually, where you got your incidents at the top, whether or not everything's good with a green check or bad with red. They show the top applications that are used, the traffic that it's seeing. You got your advisories, and what's neat about advisories is they're going to give you some information on things such as, hey, you have controllers that aren't patched for crack attack, as an example. You can list your most affected clients, your problematic clients, and maybe you want to hop on that proactively and be able to troubleshoot that without the user trying to reach out to you, because this way, if your team has time, they can try to fix any issues that they see coming up. And also, if you have AP groups set up, so in a Cisco environment, you could have AP groups. Nyansa will actually take that in. Voyance, the actual product here, will take in that AP group and then categorize which AP groups have either the least healthy environments, Wi-Fi environments, or maybe the most healthy. And then you could also organize it in where are most of the clients at in these AP groups. So that's just a summary dashboard. This episode is proudly sponsored by IPA, the visual packet analysis software from MetaGeek. As a Wi-Fi professional, you probably understand the benefit of packet analysis for troubleshooting wireless issues. And if you have any experience with most common packet analysis solutions out there, you also understand that sifting through hundreds of lines of data to find the cause of a network problem is a little like looking for a needle in a haystack. IPA takes a visual approach to wireless frame analysis. So instead of dumping raw packets for you to evaluate, IPA presents your data in multi-layered pie charts that make it easy to understand which networks, devices, and packets are using your available wireless airtime. With fast and easy filtering options, color-coded labels to show data throughput versus management overhead, and expert tips based on observed conditions, IPA makes 802.11 frame analysis easier than ever. Visit metageek.com/CTS and use the code CTS10 for 10% off your purchase of IPA. So now, as the technical person, I want to dive into the actual analysis that gets done in this platform, Voyance. One of the newest things that's been in beta for a while is called this recommendation engine. Now, the view of the recommendation engine is quite different from what I'm used to, and because of this visualization that they give you, it's a lot of circles, and they'll group a lot of the APs and AP groups together with relationship lines where you've got an AP group or an AP within an AP group that can hear another AP in another AP group. And then the larger the circles are, the more problems that are there. They're the most affected client hours that are affected, the larger the circle is. Now, this is a beta section. As I hover over analytics or analysis, and then it says recommendation, and then in parentheses it says beta. So as I'm looking at this, it can give me recommendations on what kind of issues to look at. And just right off the bat, without sorting anything or without changing any settings, it's telling me the area to look at is to alleviate poor coverage in 5 gigahertz. And it'll tell you which APs are impacted the highest, but it tells you overall there's 930 client hours affected here, and this is within the span of 2 weeks. And one thing to mention is you can always change the time frame in which you have when you're looking at your settings. So on the recommendation engine, right now it's set to 2 weeks, which I can't actually change in this section. But when you click on or hover, actually, when you hover over alleviate poor coverage in 5 gigahertz, it highlights those circles that are most affected. But then if you click on it, it's actually giving some pretty interesting data where it'll tell you at the hours by time of day when those client hours are more prevalent. So the most being in the afternoon for this specific access point and the other access points that are affected. Most of the problems happen in the afternoon. And that's maybe because there's more client devices in the afternoon. I don't know, but it also lists morning, midday, evening, and night. And then it also lists the top affected AP. So now I can drill down to the exact AP that's having most of these client hours affected. And there's one with 448. And if I click on that, now it provides me kind of the same view that I had when I was troubleshooting clients, but now I'm looking at the AP view, and it's giving me, what AP group it is assigned to, what model that is, and this one it looks like an Aruba AP275, which controller it's connected to, which is neat because if you have a large environment, sometimes it's not very easy to know. All right, I have a problem with a client, I got to figure out what AP that guy was connecting to. All right, now that I found what AP that guy's connected to, which controllers it connected to, those different things, first world problems. But as you're trying to figure out these details, it makes it easier for you to determine where exactly this AP is, what settings it has, because right off the bat on this page, I can see it all. So now I see radio properties as well, what it's operating on the 2.4 gigahertz. What radio channel? So this one's channel 6. It's a 20 megahertz channel, and even what power it's transmitting at. And also the same for the 5 gigahertz. And what SSIDs it's also broadcasting. So what's also interesting is the AP view also has an event timeline. And so the event timeline can show things such as channel change. When did the band change channels? And if you have something like RRM or ARM enabled, you can track these changes here within Voyance. You can tell also when the AP rebooted. Maybe there's some issue with cabling or power and the AP reboots for some reason. One of the things you could also track, which I think is interesting because I use DFS channels quite a bit, is you can actually detect or see in the timeline when APs change channels due to a DFS event. And what's interesting is you can create a report where you can show all the APs that change channels due to DFS events. And this is useful because if you're deploying DFS and people are saying they're having Wi-Fi issues, maybe the issue is the APs changing channels because of these events. And you can track those changes and how much it affects clients when you're looking at what's happening in your wireless environment. Another view within the AP view is you can see how many clients were connected to this AP given the time frame of when the AP was affected, because I came from the recommendation engine and I was looking at APs with poor 5 gigahertz coverage. So I clicked on an AP that had the most client hours affected, and now it's listing from this time period, which was between 8:15 and 9:15, all the clients that were connected, what radio they were connected, were they active or not. It's pretty interesting to see how many clients. So you can also develop reports on how many devices are connecting to APs. Maybe you have issues where you aren't meeting capacity or the high density. You need to put in some more APs in the area to accommodate all these devices that are coming into the environment. So it's a way to trend some of this analytics and see where you need to optimize your wireless networks and see where your weak points are, because it is going to tell you, all right, these are where all the issues are occurring on the Wi-Fi network, and this is how you can see it. And what's my most favorite part here is the analysis details page, where let's say you are upgrading a site and you want to know, all right, I want to see how bad is this site. So I can drill it down to the AP groups, because in my environment, I like using AP groups. So for example, let's say one of the buildings I have is an AP group, and you can go into the analysis details section, and you could filter this report to show just the AP group. Now, there's many different ways you can filter this data. You can do it just on the AP. Maybe you have a custom group that you've set up within Voyance. You can do that. You want to maybe look at 2.4 only or 5 gigahertz only, or maybe there's a specific SSID you want to look at. But I like to drill into AP groups, so I'm going to just select one. And let's say you want to know how is this group performing based on a specific metric. And one of the common metrics that I look at is the client Wi-Fi performance, because I really want to see the end user experience. What is the Wi-Fi performance of these devices? Now, there's other metrics you could look at. You can look at radius, DHCP, DNS. You could look at other things like maybe call manager voice performance. So anyone with Cisco phones, you can look at Wi-Fi calling performance, and even other application performance if that's mission critical to you. So if everybody in your environment uses Skype, for example, if they use Skype a lot over Wi-Fi, maybe that's something you wanna track. But for simplicity, I'm going to use the client Wi-Fi performance. And on this page, it's going to have a graph of the analysis, and it's going to provide you with the baseline experience. And it's going to show you the percent of clients that are affected by this metric, which is the client Wi-Fi performance. So as a baseline, and I know this is hard to imagine over a podcast, so I'm going to provide some screenshots for you guys. And the screenshots can be found on the website for the show notes page. That's cleartosend.net/105 is where you'll see a handful of screenshots. Some of the, so going back to this graph, there's a baseline experience showing the percent of clients affected, and it has a trending graph over a certain time period. And I have this usage set to high, so I want to see it when the usage is high in this AP group that I'm looking at. And the client performance of this AP group, it says 3.2% are affected. Now, one of the examples that I want to give you guys, because this one's a bad example, 3.2% affected is, that's not so bad. But let's say it was a high number, such as 40%. During the times that Wi-Fi is needed and is used quite often and the most, maybe 40% of clients are affected on the client Wi-Fi performance. So they're having a poor Wi-Fi performance. And you can see this graph trending. It's around 40% most of the time. Let's say you want to know what those problems are. This analysis details page is actually going to analyze all the data it's collected and then present to you what it looks like the most common issues from that time period. So potential root causes such as there's a lot of retransmissions on either the 2.4 or the 5 gigahertz band. And then it'll give you some client properties such as the most affected SSID, which AP those were most affected clients were, how many client hours were affected, what channel as an example. And then it'll provide you with some generic next steps and some symptoms. Now, the way I view this is it's taking data and analyzing that and telling you what it's seeing, what that could be the potential root cause. Now, you want to take your expertise here and try to determine what exactly is happening. Maybe you need to gather more information beyond this, or maybe you go and look at your AP and you do find, maybe through clean air, that the channel it's on is actually seeing a lot of interference on the channel. Maybe it's channel 36. Maybe because everybody's using channel 36, so it's just congested. Those are some of the things you need to look at, but with the Voyance platform, it is gathering all that data and trying to give you the potential root cause based on all the data it's collected. And so there are ways to look deeper into this. And you could either go down to the AP and then start seeing the specific clients and just keep looking at that time period where the most affected issues were occurring. Now it will list out a number of different common issues that happened in that time period, which is very useful. So you can try to correlate some of that data. But one thing that's really neat as well is, let's say you say, all right, this group here, it's a building, it's in an AP group. I'm going to redesign that whole building. It's due for a redesign because maybe it was designed before Wi-Fi really took off and all these people started bringing devices into the environment. So let's say you make your changes, you redesign it, and you let it go for a couple of weeks. And what you'll notice if you go back to this analysis page, analysis details, and filter the report just on the AP group, you can look at a longer time frame and actually see if your redesign was a positive or a negative change. And so if it was a positive change, let's say previously it was 40% of clients affected, with your new redesign, you should see that benchmark actually go down quite a bit. So let's say it was 40% affected. You made a positive change in that environment. You designed it properly for the density, the capacity, the types of devices, etc. You did proper channel plan. Maybe you're not using RM. And then all of a sudden now it's only 2% of clients that are affected. Then you've done, you have the data to show that, hey, you were able to make a positive change in this environment, and now they're all working the way they should be working over Wi-Fi. Some other things too with this analysis details is you can create these location benchmarks against other AP groups to see comparison of how affected these sites are, and you could show that, all right, this similar building is comparing much better than another similar building, and it maybe there's some other issues going on. There could be interference, or it could be the types of devices in that environment. And then also you could see which of the clients are actually most affected in that area. So I think that's a great way to troubleshoot as you try to figure out, maybe it is specific types of devices that are having problems. Maybe it's those IoT devices that's actually causing that analysis to show why the benchmark is poor. So that's one way to look at analysis, and that's starting too. I started off with the recommendation engine. So I think I started with alleviate poor coverage, and then try to go drill down to a specific AP, which then try to look at incidents and see, okay, I see clients with poor Wi-Fi performance. So you can start drilling in further, seeing what that client, how that client is affected. And it'll say the incident summary, drilling down, that this specific client has maybe poor Facebook performance, because there are environments where they work with social media quite a bit. This client could be located in a poor coverage area. And when you look at that, you should be able to see on the client details analysis page things such as the SNR. You take the SNR and then you take the noise floor. You should be able to determine the RSSI. So that's one way to start with the recommendation engine. And again, that's in beta, and it's a completely different view from what I'm used to. And it can definitely be kind of, all right, where do I start? Because it shows you the overall view of your Wi-Fi network, and it just uses circles with different colors. But then you really want to look at the different recommendations it's making. Now, maybe you don't want to see the recommendations it's making. You just want to explore different access points, different issues. Now, when you hit explore, there's a button for explore there. You can actually start filtering out different root causes. So I can select, all right, I just care about 5 gigahertz, but I want to filter out the different root causes that I'm having. So maybe it's sticky clients, for example. So I can look at sticky clients, and then I want to drill that down further to a specific SSID. maybe I don't care about the visitor SSID. I just want to look at the main employee SSID and then apply that filter. And then it'll show me just the most impacted APs. And from there, I can start troubleshooting. So again, that's the recommendation engine. I think will take a little bit of getting used to. Maybe it's just the way the view is done, but I think it's a great way to start digging into issues that you might not necessarily know they exist, and starting with the recommendation engine and start drilling into what you care about. So what band, what kind of root causes you're trying to fix. Maybe there's a specific root cause people are describing. And from here, you can start drilling into more detail down to the details it's collecting. As I was pointing out with clients, their SNR, the retransmits, looking at the timeline, maybe the AP is changing power, maybe it's poor roaming, those kind of details. So I think I drilled into Voyance quite a bit. Really hard to describe to you guys if you can't see it. So again, head over to the show notes, cleartosend.net/105 to see some of the screenshots that I've taken. I've taken screenshots of the different graphs you can view, what the service desk view looks like, different graphs such as if you want to look at like access point neighbors is a good one. You can actually see on your 5 and 2.4 radios from a very specific AP what AP that hears in a graphical form. I think that's a great way to look at it. It even tells you which APs are on the same channel as it, so you can try to alleviate some of the co-channel interference that you're receiving, because when you hover over certain APs, it'll tell you what channel it's on and the transmit power. Some other graphs that I provide on the show notes are specific issues, like radius issues, what that actually looks like if you're trying to troubleshoot radius, or if a large number of devices start having radius issues. It doesn't have to be radius, but I'm just using this as an example. Maybe it deviates from the baseline, right? So maybe less than 1% are affected by radius issues, but then all of a sudden at 7 a.m., you have 90% of devices affected but with radius issues. And it could be a quick way of knowing, all right, something happened with the radius server. Either a configuration change was made, which disrupted people's authentication, or maybe the radius server is down. You could also look at different statistics, such as the amount of time it takes to do a radius transaction. Maybe there's a certain delay happening there, or there's latency, or maybe there's a lot of drops happening. It's one way to look at it too. I would say overall, looking at Voyance, it's a lot of data that they present to you. And so it's there's a little bit of a learning curve as you try to figure out what your workflow is to troubleshooting a client. I think it helps large environments where there might not be the right staff in place to try to troubleshoot as quickly as possible. It also gives you an insight into your Wi-Fi environment. All right, what's happening? Where are most of the issues? What integrations I can have here? So one of the good ones is the ServiceNow integration. If you're using ServiceNow for your ticketing system, there is an integration into FreeRadius, I believe. So if you want to get more insight into FreeRadius, and all this really is just grabbing a lot of data, using analytics to process it and tell you, all right, here are your root causes, here where all your incidents are occurring, these are all the clients affected, this is the area in which all these issues are happening, so you can better drill into the issue and fix the issue as fast as possible. And I think this is where Voyance really has really kicked up its capability, because for, like I said, environments where you don't have the staff to really handle all these issues, this can be a tool for you guys to use and figure out, all right, these are the issues I need to tackle. You can set your priorities I'll tackle this first, I'll tackle this issue, and then you can see whether or not the changes you make on your controller actually make a positive or a negative change. Maybe the code that you just released is causing some major issues with your clients. That's one way to look at it as well, because when changes are made on the controller, those how do I describe it? I think some of those automatic changes will be triggered as annotations within the graph. So when you see certain dips and rises, you can see, all right, at this time, there's an annotation here. The controller upgraded to the latest code, but then now we're seeing a bunch of Wi-Fi performance issues, or we're seeing DNS issues as an example. So it could be anything, but the data is here and presented to you to help you figure out what you need to do to get the job done so business can keep rolling. So that's all I have for Nyansa right now. And just looking at it since MFD2 from 2017, looks like they are trying to roll out some new features. They're trying to, looks like it's pretty stable looking at the demo account. It's responsive. I'm able to drill into different data sets pretty quickly. So that's Nyansa Voyance for you guys. If you want to learn more about Voyance, head over to nyansa.com. That's NYANSA.com. And if you want to see the screenshots that I've collected, head over to the show notes. That's cleartosend.net/105. Again, I want to thank you guys for listening to this episode. Look forward to hearing your comments and what you guys think about each and every episode that we publish. If you haven't already subscribed to us in iTunes, you'll automatically get the latest episodes downloaded to your podcast app. And if you guys would like to leave us a review, let us know how we're doing. We would appreciate that as well. You can head over to cleartosend.net/iTunes, I believe, and that brings you right to the page where you can leave your comments and review. And again, I want to thank you guys for listening to this episode. We will see you next week.